Let me paint a common occurrence for you. Product VPs and leaders start out as individual contributors, product managers. Because of their outstanding work, delivering value for the organization and delighting their customers, the product manager's responsibilities and influence quickly increases, resulting in a promotion to product VP at some point. Sounds great, right? Well, maybe not. A couple months after the promotion, they are still struggling and their teams are frustrated. And if you were that newly promoted VP, you might be wondering if you made a terrible mistake. Let's turn that around. This discussion will help to equip you with the most critical transition point that you can make in your product management career, the leap from individual contributor to product leader. This isn't just about getting promoted, it's about fundamentally shifting how you think, act, and add value. And if you're already a product leader, the discussion will also help you to improve and help you mentor your ICs. Our guest is Piers Fallowfield-Cooper, who has coached over 130 C-suite executives through major leadership transitions. He spent 30 years in senior executive roles himself, scaling companies across finance, technology, and e-publishing. His book, Are You Still the Future?, was a Business Book of the Year finalist in 2024. He knows how to effectively navigate the journey from individual contributor to executive leader, and I'm looking forward to learning from him. Also, if you're listening and you want to watch our discussion instead, go to our YouTube channel. Just search for Product Mastery Now on YouTube. Let's jump in right after this.
How can you unlock your full potential as a product manager? We're sharing the product management insights you need. They are based on the 7 research-backed knowledge areas for product mastery. You'll learn to create products customers love, enhance your influence, and elevate your career. Welcome to Product Mastery Now, hosted by Dr. Chad McAllister, product management professor, practitioner, and your guide.
Piers, thanks so much for being with us.
Chad, absolute pleasure. Really looking forward to our conversation.
Likewise, you have such depth of experience leading organizations and also helping people move into the C-suite and navigate that as leaders. And I thought you would be really useful to help us think about, well, as an individual contributor, a product manager, many times either moving into a product leadership role, or product managers often find themselves in another leadership role in the organization over time. You could help us navigate this a little bit. I kind of want to start maybe, I don't know if this is a mindset thing or not, we'll see where you want to take it, but as you've coached executives over the years, what is that jump from being kind of the individual contributor to leadership that makes it so challenging? Because I see a lot of people stumble with this, and I've talked to a lot of leaders who have talked about how they stumbled with it.
A number of things that go on. First of all, with the exception of medicine and a few sciences, as far as I know, people as they go through their career become more broad. So it's what I call T-shaped leadership. So when you're a specialist and maybe you're a product manager, you're all-knowing, all-seeing in your lovely super niche that goes very deep. And then suddenly, boom, we're looking for horizontal and we're looking for breadth. So the thing that I see it most is when people, for example, get promoted to a very senior position and suddenly they're on maybe an executive committee, an exco of some kind, and they bring all their knowledge, and it's not their knowledge that's being sought after. What's being sought is their ability to ask good questions and look at the world differently. So it's very curious. In medicine, you become more and more specialist. I always said if I was going to go into medicine, I'd be the guy who only does right knees. And you'd say, somebody came in with their knee problem, you say, yeah, I can do this, but I only do right knees. But, I know someone who does left knees and we can work together. Because they've worked out that financially and knowledge-wise. I had a friend who needed a little eye operation. The person he was recommended to go and see said, oh yeah, he said, I could do this, but I'm a cornea man and you really need, what's the other one? The one at the back of the eye. I'm a cornea man and you need whatever the other one was. And he was kind of, but they do become so specialist. So you've got this huge challenge that you're now promoted into a position and everything that made you successful is not going to make you successful in the next part of your journey.
Right.
So one of the key terrible things is that you can't be friends with everybody anymore. And people don't understand that there's a price to pay with this stepping up Yes, there's lots of benefits, but there is a price to pay. And for most people, it's the journey from I to we. And for
Hmm.
some, that's easier than others. So I think that's where this challenge begins.
I like the summary there, the journey from I to we. You also mentioned the skills, the capabilities that made you stand out as the individual contributor is not what leadership is looking for, and that might be more about asking good questions, right? Let's drill into some of those shifts, and maybe you'll add some others along the way. But what should a product manager or any individual contributor, but our context, be thinking about in preparing for that shift? Because as you said, I think we're working on our careers, we're getting better at, for product people, better at understanding the customer, better at understanding the capabilities of the company. We've built our network as we need it for the people we have to influence. If we're trying to be a little bit more proactive and thinking about, well, I would like that leadership role in the future, what kinds of shifts need to take place in us?
Well, the important one is in the matrix, you're offered the blue pill or the red pill.
Right?
So you have to really make sure in your thinking that this is what you want and not what you think you want. Because I'm afraid we've all been inculcated from the earliest age through education, parents, friends, associates, to think that promotion is better. Because really, leadership, these jobs in the top, it's a pyramid, it goes up. But not everybody can be emperor or pope. So the secret really is to try and find your sweet spot. Now, as a thrusting young, first of all, thrusting young teenager, then thrusting young executive, I couldn't understand why my dad turned down promotion every year. It was just like in some parallel universe. Why wouldn't he? We could have more money, do better things. He'd be all these things, more prestige. And my dad was very smart. My dad had found his super sweet spot. He'd found a super sweet spot. He was an engineer. He'd found the super sweet spot where he liked the place he worked. He enjoyed the colleagues he worked with. He liked the level of responsibility he had. And it was an absolute sweet spot. So the first question people really have to think about when they think about, oh, I'd love to get promoted. Why? People don't ask themselves, why do you want it? One of the things I always challenge the leaders I go to work with, often I'm brought in at what I would call moments of inflection. So this is often career change, promotion, stepping up, new country, new job. And I was asked, I warn HR or the hiring person who's hired me, you do understand that this might cause profound thinking and some things that we don't plan for may happen. And every now and again, people leave. I worked with someone who had finally come on this program, this mentoring program I run one on one, who'd been thinking about it for ages and ages. And he really wanted to do it because he'd been promoted. And we went off site for the day. And he was chatting away. I said, well, why don't you? And you could tell he was someone, he was technical and he'd been a product manager, semiconductor design. He'd been a product manager. And so I said, look, why don't you draw on the whiteboard the organizational structure? Because some clients are very easy, they talk about themselves. Others find it more easy to start with talking about the organization. So we talk about the organization now. And oh, no. And he'd been employee about number 14 or 15 of now a very big organization. He was writing all these people up. And I said, well, how do you get on with him? Oh, I don't know. And about an hour into this, he said, do you know what? I don't really like any of them. Oh. And so I said, well, what do you want to do? So he decided he was going to go off and think about it. So he had a little baby classic car, little two-seater sports car, an MG or something. So I'll go for a drive and come back. I said, oh, great. So a couple of hours later, he comes back. He said, I'm going to quit. Okay, well, are you sure about this? And we talked a lot. And it had dawned on him suddenly that he'd been propelled along a route that probably wasn't his route. And there was a lovely man, a philosopher, who said, Joseph Campbell, who was the editor of Jung's last work and also a studier, a scholar of myth and comparative religion. And he said, if the path ahead is very clear, it's not your path, you're on somebody else's.
Mm.
So I think we really need to think a bit about why and the trade-offs. If you've got a young family, do you really want to do you really understand the tension that's going to come now between your desire to spend time with the family and your need to get things done in your new position? So that's the first place I'd start. So let's presume all the answers to that was yes, I understand. They don't, but they'll say yes, yes, I do. So the first thing you have to do is you have to stop doing. So your success has probably been built on doing.
Right.
So your next success is going to be on thinking and leading. So I always actively encourage people to have thinking time. And by thinking time, I mean real thinking time. And in that thinking time, doing something different. Thinking time isn't necessarily just sitting at your desk, not in a meeting. Thinking time is having a stimulation from somewhere else. So you've got to have some different inputs. And then you have to start thinking about how am I going to how am I going to become a leader who, sorry about the grammar here. How would I how do I become a leader who people would like to be led by me?
Right.
That's a rather, but I think that your listeners are fairly smart. I think they'll get it. But you've been promoted because you're clever, because you're knowledgeable, and because people saw in you the potentiality for leadership. Yeah. So now, how do you fulfill that potentiality? Okay. Well, the first thing is you can observe. You can look at people around you, new colleagues. Which ones do you like their style? Which ones are effective? Which one gets stuff done? Start paying attention.
Right.
What is it that they do that you could do in your way? The secret has to be in your way. You can't just mirror and mimic somebody else. You really have to make it your own.
I remember a graduate class I took on the side, not as part of a program, on leadership. And it just exposed us to different leadership theories, transformational, transactional, situational, different stuff. But the final assignment was to write your personal leadership approach. And it was probably one of the best assignments in any class I've ever taken because you had to come up with, like, if I was leading, how would I do that? What would that look like? And it was a very good thing to think through. And I think that's one of the things you're suggesting with this is look around and see what you like, maybe reflect on leaders that you disliked that you've had experiences with, and maybe ones that you really liked as well, and think about what works for you.
Mhm. So, building on this, Chad, leadership is an embodied position. It's not an intellectual position, it's an embodied position. It's how you walk, how you talk, how you interact, how you think, how you behave. So it all comes from inside. It's not oh, I've been on a program, now I'm a leader. Let me ask you a question because I think this is really valuable for our listeners. Where do you see and where do you hear the challenges coming? Is it after someone's accepted it and there's a little mini honeymoon and they were flavor of the month and then it all starts getting difficult? Or what do you observe?
Yeah, I think that's the normal pattern. As you said, there's something kind of expected about the promotion path. If you want to rise in responsibilities, many organizations they don't have as much of a strength in a technical path. There certainly are organizations where people I've heard some interviews with people that they've been a product manager for a couple decades in one role because they love being an individual contributor and they've decided that's what fits them. But for most organizations, if you want to grow in responsibility, it's typically moving into a management or a leadership sort of position. And maybe these are just the stories that I hear more of or the ones that have stuck with me. But it's after they're in that position, recognizing what made them great before and stood out. They have no experience with now what makes them great and stand out as a leader. And the big distinction usually focuses on people, right? I went from being really good at whatever the technical thing was to
Yeah.
now I have to know how to work with people in a way that I have not done before.
Okay. Perfect. So people are usually a pain or a joy. And that usually depends on how you approach it. So it's from inside. So the first thing I would do is I'd look at my team. My background was not product management, so my first background was more the sales and marketing route. So classically in sales and marketing, you've got a team of 10 or 20 who are doing the sales. And the sales director will say the following sort of conversation. They've got Fred, Harry, and Mary, who are superstars. They've got the three at the bottom who really should go. Then they've got all this group in the middle, and they talk about if only we could get those bottom ones of the middle up to the top end of the middle, everything would be all right. So, totally the wrong place to look. You look for the almost superstars and invest in them. Okay? So, this then comes to fundamentally my entire model of how to be successful in the world. Ask the question, what's working? Ask the question, what's working? Why does it work? What are the elements that make it work? So you will find now you've stepped up to a leadership position, you'll find that some bits of it work and some bits of it work exceptionally well. And some bits of it almost work. So the place to spend your time is where it almost works. What are the other elements you have to add in? Do you have to add a little more time for the meeting with the people who work for you? Do you have to have a little space before the meeting so you can get ready for it? One of the joys of Outlook or whatever they're using for your calendar is there's no spaces. And someone, you and all your colleagues, will fill it up. There aren't even any bathroom breaks in it, I don't believe. Last time I looked, I mean, what kind of dumb product is that doesn't even let you have a bathroom break?
Right.
So just keep asking, when does it work? And I'd just like to make a very slight detour into a piece of research that I read about peak performance. And we all think about all these incredible things about peak performance. But peak performance actually comes down to a couple of things. Number one, do you or the person who works for you, are they getting enough sleep? Because without enough sleep, the rest is off. Number two, is the environment pleasant, positive, and optimistic? That produces best results. And then the third thing, are the deadlines fair, with a slight stretch, and agreed? Those three combination, enough sleep, nice environment, an agreed, fair, slight stretch. This is where we have to do it. Peak performance.
I like the elements. I'm thinking about past experiences, right? The positive environment has a big factor. And I think someone moving into a leadership role, particularly from that product management technical role, they don't, I think that environment is more different than they probably expected. They're, as you said earlier, they may have been friends with peers. And now, if they're promoted into that position, that's a different relationship to have. And they're trying to figure out how can I be effective and work through those relationship aspects as well. So the environment, I think, suddenly feels different, even if it was positive before. You're trying to wade through what's different here and how do I navigate that?
Let me add in, because you just prompted a thought. My suspicion is, as successful product managers, they tended to just do it. And I suspect now, in this new important leadership role, they're doing too much thinking.
Mm,
And doing too much thinking, not the good thinking, too
right.
much second guessing thinking. Should I do this? Should I do that? And then there is this kind of, a bit like on a bicycle, if you just get on with it and ride it, everything's fine. If you start thinking about it, it gets very wobbly and then you can fall off. I'm trying to think about my kind of first couple of promotions. And when I think about them, one, I didn't go looking for them. They kind of found me. And I already was, I think, what you'd call a kind of pop-up leader, in that without a formal leadership position, I already was something of a leader. It was just the way I turned up. So it wasn't such a big shock. But maybe if perhaps you're someone who's slightly introverted, a little more thoughtful, a little more enjoys the product and the thing rather than the people bit, it's probably a bit of a shock. But adaptability is the key. Darwin is not misquoted because he's quoted very accurately. People absolutely quote him perfectly, which said it was the survival of the fittest. But for Darwin, he wasn't talking about elbows, fittest. He was talking about adaptability, that it was the plant or the species or whatever that was the most adaptable, would be the one to thrive. So I'd like to add into that the law of requisite variety. So law of requisite variety says that the person or the species or the part of a system that's the most flexible will take over the system. So if you are a person who is helpful, thoughtful, easy to get on with, and delivers, and you don't mind exactly how you do it, you'll get to take over the system.
Okay. Back to this course I mentioned, I remember thinking about people's different leadership approaches and some discussion about what people would do. And I think one of the things that was positioned to us was if you were asked to come into an organization in a leadership role, what would you do right off the bat? And I remember some people saying, well, I would obviously fix the things that were wrong and start on a new direction. Others I regarded as more thoughtful, saying, well, I'd probably spend the first 90 days understanding what works, what doesn't work, trying to build relationships with people. And then together, we could work on having identified together what we think could be improved. Let's work on that, right? That kind of suggests to me that this adaptability approach and being more helpful and thoughtful.
Well, number one, you can't undo day one stupid. No, it's very difficult to rebuild. We had a prime minister a couple of years ago, Liz Truss, and she wrecked our economy for us in the space of 2 weeks or so. You can't undo day one stupid. So you do have to, though, give a sense of difference because you do have a unique window of opportunity. You're
Mhm.
new, you're in charge. You know, what the questions, what is he or she going to be like? So you do have a chance to. One of the questions I'd be asking is, what do we do really well around here? You could tell my bias from now. What do you do really well around here? Are there any dumb things we should stop? And there'll
Yeah.
be something, and you'll be a hero, a heroine for oh, we don't have to do that anymore because there will be one stupid thing that everyone has to do. So that's good. I, I think I've been thinking about your original question, and it's been going round and round and round my head. I think the reason you get the wobbles is because you're overcomplicating it. Okay.
Okay.
So I think you turn up as a decent human, you have time for your team, you think about who your real stakeholders are, you learn to make the difference to understand the difference between when it has to be perfect and when good enough is okay. And then I think you get on with it. See, all the learning's in the doing. You can go to a dozen leadership classes, a dozen this, whatever it is, which will be helpful and give you ideas. But actually, it's not until you do it that not till you do it. That's how you learn.
Right.
You know?
On that point, the learning is in the doing. Absolutely. I think leaders emerge through experience. Some might be born with innate qualities or traits that are helpful. Some learn things along the way, but experience is what really focuses that. But at the same time, you have coached many people through leadership challenges. And I know many people who have moved into a product VP role for the first time, right? Who have, and often it's the company that provides this, which I think is a fantastic thing for the company to do, that have a coach that they're working with because these are expected things to come up, right? This change from being able to solve the problem to helping others ask the right questions themselves and together move things forward as opposed to that individual contributor. So while the learning is in the doing, what does it look like for when you have helped people in the past move into they're wrestling with this more responsibility issue? What are the key things that you're putting in their mind to think about? You've given us many, right? Which I think are spot on, right? It's being decent to others, having time for your team, as you just shared, knowing what needs to get done and what is good enough along the way. But how do you help that person?
So I always take a client off site at the beginning of the assignment, either for a day or 2 days,
Okay.
depending on seniority and size, because I want a real extended period of time to get to know the person, to understand their environment, the situation. And so I will have sent them off a couple of things to do, and I will have asked them to do a strengths-based assessment because I'm going to discuss with them where their real strengths lie,
Do
what
you
they're good
use
at.
StrengthsFinder or
I use
another?
I use StrengthsFinder.
Okay.
Excellent tool.
Yeah.
Excellent. And I would talk them through both from a strengths base, but ah, look out here, look out here. And then I talked to them about, I met Marcus Buckingham and had a long conversation with him around strengths. And he describes strengths as used in StrengthsFinder as those things that energize you, which is a very good way of looking at strengths because strengths are not necessarily the skills that you're competent. Look, I can do an Excel spreadsheet and I feel a little of my soul being scraped as I do it. My accountant does one for me and, oh, now put these buttons on the bottom for you to
Right.
toggle. So who should be doing the spreadsheets? So start thinking about those things that energize you. And this is what I do with the client. What's energizing you? And where are you going to put your energy in? There's a sweet spot, which is what you're really good at, what the business needs, and what's valued around here. So I would ask for that kind of diagram. Now, and there we've got a sweet spot. Okay, we've got an older product line, so we've got to really be thinking about the future. Generally, we have or have not been successful in this, and we're looking for this kind of lead. So start thinking about where the sweet spot is. So I do that with them. I'd want to understand and map their sponsors and supporters. Where are the people? So probably the people who was very key to getting them promoted. That would be
Mhm.
a key sponsor. So I get them to map out sponsors and supporters. Then really, and this is a little esoteric, but maybe helpful. So Aristotle and Plato were two of the great thinkers. Aristotle gave us this or that, good or bad, very Aristotelian logic that has its place, but ultimately trips us up because we're forced to decide. Plato had a much more romantic view of the world, and Plato believed that in the heavens there was a prototype of you, and that your job on earth was to become that person, that potentiality. Now, my professor at university, when I did my master's in coaching and organizational consulting, said, all models are wrong, but some just happen to be useful,
Right.
which I think is a very healthy place to be. So I think of my client a little bit like the Michelin man. So I think here he is. So where does she need to go? So my job is to hold for
Pump up
them,
some. Yep.
to hold it so that they can become it. So really start thinking about what's your unique gift? What's that skill? What's that thing that you do elegantly? When you were a product manager, why were you so good at it? And can I take those things that I did so well there and adapt it to my new leadership position? So you can see my entire bias. Work with what's working, work with the
Mhm.
with the energy of success, find the doors that are ready to be pushed open. That's the way to be successful
Yep.
and happy.
Yep. Yep. Play to your strengths, play in the areas that bring you energy, find good people to work with. This sounds fairly straightforward, right? At the risk of turning this into a coaching session that we don't have time for, I'll tell you the first time I did StrengthsFinder, it was when I was considering this move from being a product person and leading groups and product to perhaps more going into teaching, which I never thought I would do, right? What wasn't in my plans at all. But, what things happened and I found myself teaching more. And so StrengthsFinder was one of the tools that I used to help me consider that. And I got very disappointing results on my StrengthsFinder, right? The strengths that I wanted because it related to the things I felt like I was doing. I wanted strategy, right? The strategizer person. I wanted a person that was the executive, that was in control, get things done. I saw these as having that I had some strengths in these areas. And instead, I got back this list of things that none of them rang meaningful to me. They might have rang true, but they just didn't stand out as meaningful. One of them was, I don't know if they call it relationship, something like this.
Relator.
Relator, thank you. And I'm like, what do I do with that? And that was my number one. Relator is my number one. And it didn't have any meaning to me. And it wasn't until a few years later that I was in a group of people that was led by a person who does leadership coaching. And he had listened to my podcast a bit. And this came up that my number one strength was relator. He said, well, of course it is. I can hear it every time you do a podcast. You're really good at creating safe spaces for people to be comfortable and to show up and be themselves and try to get work done. And I reflected on just that simple statement. And I went, I've never considered that a strength, but that is a history of being good at helping people feel like they're in a safe space where they can show up and be themselves, and together we can get things done. And sometimes it's just hearing things expressed in a way that makes sense. And I suspect that is one of the strengths of having a coach when you're making one of these leadership roles. As you said, it kind of puff you up in the area where maybe you have a strength and you don't recognize why it's important that you can reflect this.
Yes. I just before we started this, I was talking to a client who, and as a coach, fortunately, I'm a coach and mentor, so I'm allowed to give advice rather than forever saying, would you like to tell me more about that? How does that make you feel? I mean, that has its place, but something a little more interactive. And it's probably obvious to everybody except for him what he should be doing. But you have to sometimes just wait for the client to catch up and find it. He has some amazing skills, some wonderful strengths, and he's just not applying them because he's not in the right place physically. But that's something he's going to have to work out for himself.
Yeah.
I'd just like to add in a couple of not technical, but technical comments. In your leadership role, there's a couple of things that you really want to do. We've got several bits of the brain, the more modern bits, prefrontal cortex, all those kind of things. And we've got ancient bit of the brain at the back, the amygdala. So the last thing you want to do as a leader is wake up people's amygdalas. So they're there for a very particular reason, a historical reason. They're there to protect us in the wilds. So when we're out in the forest walking and there's something that looks like a twig or a snake, we don't need the prefrontal cortex having a chat with us about do we think it's a snake or a... So that's where the amygdala kicks in and only gives you three options: fight, flight, or freeze. And in that situation, freeze is a very good thing to do. If the twig starts wiggling away, it wasn't a twig. So we want to basically keep the system that we're trying to manage, to operate, to calibrate, to move forward. We want to keep it nice and quiet, just nice, like good machinery, just ticking over. So things that tend to activate the amygdala are things, because obviously it was there to protect us against a tiger, saber-toothed tiger, things like that.
Right.
But in its modern interpretation, the office interpretation, the environment, fairness is a big one. That if you do something that is perceived as unfair, there's an intellectual unfairness, but there's also a deep visceral unfairness. And that's very hard to get over. If you're very unpredictable as a leader, if people can't work out, are you really a friend or a foe? That's another one that tends to bring this unsettledness to the system. People do their best work with high levels of autonomy. If you're always over somebody's shoulder, interfering with your autonomy, that tends to set off the amygdala. So these are the kind of things. You want a nice, gently humming machine. And I suppose the other thing you have to ultimately decide in your leadership role is how vulnerable do you want to be? So everyone, when they talk about groups and teams and people working together, they talk about the foundation is trust. And the foundation is trust. And when you have trust, you can be vulnerable, and then everything else can happen. That's great, except in order to have trust, someone has to show vulnerability. So someone has to go first. So it might as well be you to show some openness, some vulnerability, and then you probably will create a system of trust in your group. And then from that, all the things around performance, achievement, success will flow.
Excellent. Yeah, appreciate the response to not triggering the fight, flight, freeze sort of response. And within that, I suspect that the issue of the autonomy is probably one of the harder things for the outstanding individual contributor as they move into product leadership, because it comes up like, well, the person didn't do it the way I would do it,
Yep.
but maybe they did it okay. And maybe this is more of a coaching and development thing than just a micromanaging sort of thing. So,
Look, to build on that,
yes.
the greatest enjoyment you will probably get is to be a coach to your team. And you will probably learn a lot about them and also a lot about yourself in the process.
Yeah.
If you can create a learning environment, a coaching, mentoring, learning environment, I think you'll find yourself running a very happy team.
I think that's the big part of the responsibility, isn't it? So
Mm.
that's excellent. Well, thank you for all the information. I do want to take a transition here to training that I provide, because we do like seeing some money come in for this podcast through the way of mechanism for it to pay for itself. Although I really enjoy doing this podcast to help product managers and product people, but in doing so, I also have created a training system to help them become professional product managers. And it's called the Rapid Product Master Experience, the RPM experience. It does cover some leadership, cultural, team development sort of issues, and 6 other areas. These are all kind of the building blocks that the professional product manager needs to understand. Most of us have some blind spots. I was doing product work for 10 years before I went through this training, and it's training that is updated periodically and is current, and it's based on a professional association's, their research body of knowledge. I just make it easier for us to get our hands around. So if you are on your path to being a professional product manager, you probably need some depth in these 7 topics, and things like strategy and process and portfolio management and people and team development. That's called the RPM experience. Go to productmasterynow.com and you'll find out more information about that, and be glad to engage with you on that as well. As we always like to do, Piers, we do like innovation quotes around here. And I always call them an innovation quote because they always fit, whether it might be more of a success quote or something else, but they always work. What do you have for us, and what does it mean to you?
Well, I've got a couple. So I wrote an article when everybody was so excited when ChatGPT, we had that kind of Netscape moment where suddenly it was accessible to us. And I wrote a short article about it. And I actually said, the robots will adapt, will you? So one thing which will be topical is, where will AI treat us, take us? So my thought is on that particularly, and this will apply absolutely to your people who've stepped up in this leadership position or want to step up. What part of what you do is the creative part?
Mm.
Because that's the part that they can't get close to. So you're ultimately dealing with the world's biggest predictive text machine, which is very good at running regular, predictable, repetitive, complicated tasks. So remember your creativity. But the real
Hmm.
quote I'd like to leave you with is a Peter Drucker quote. Peter Drucker, who was the godfather, I guess, of management gurus before they were even invented. And Peter Drucker said, today's certainties are tomorrow's absurdities. And as we think about everything that changes, and when you're trying to, the other quote I would add, I'm sorry about this, you can always edit them out. The other quote I'd add is the one from Yogi Berra, who said wonderfully, everything he ever said was wonderful, but my favorite was, prediction is very difficult, especially about the future. So we know it's going to be different.
Right.
So let's not try and predict it. Let's remain adaptable. Let's pay attention to the signals in the system. I wrote a whole book on that, about reading the signals in the system. And I just like to say, my warmth goes out to all those people who are brave enough to step up to a management and leadership position. I think it's good on you, and I wish you great success.
And we need good people to lead good people, right? To treat others well. How can people find out about your book, about other resources you have available? Where's the best place to go?
So I'm on LinkedIn, so easy to find there, and I always respond. Website. So my name is a little difficult to start with, but once you get it, it's very easy and very rememberable. So my first name is Piers, and Piers is the Old English form of Peter. So it's the same root, Peter, Pierre, Pedro, Piers. Fallowfield is when you leave a crop out for a year on the 3 or 4 year cycle of barley or oats, and you leave it fallowfield. And the Coopers were barrel makers. So I mean, I've got a very lovely, deep in history name. So Piers Fallowfield-Cooper, there's only one of me on the web, so you'll find me. There's a website and the book, Are You Still the Future? This is I should have a bookshelf behind me, but I haven't. It's a lovely book, and it's a beautiful book, and it's a book in 2 halves. And the first half is about getting there, and the second half is about what you're going to do when you've got there. So I think for many of the people who listen to your podcast, they might enjoy it. And it, honestly, this is not just me saying it, it's a page turner. It's not dry. It's everything you need, how to do it, how to be successful and happy. And it reads like an adventure story. So I think you'll enjoy it.
Fantastic. And the best site for that is areyoustillthefuture.com.
Exactly. Thank you very much. Yes, you see, we didn't say I'm moderately dyslexic. I've done very well, actually. I've stayed with the conversation. We didn't end off somewhere else. So yes, so thank you, Chad.
It's been a wonderful discussion, and I'll make sure those links show up in the show notes as well. Piers, thank you so much for sharing in a little bit of time here with us, your great depth of experience in leadership and helping others excel in leadership as well. I've really enjoyed the discussion with you.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, Chad.
And for listeners, if you do want the show notes, the written version of everything we just discussed with Piers, simply go to productmasterynow.com/554. As always, everyone, keep innovating.
Thank you for listening to Product Mastery Now, where product leaders and managers gain product mastery through practical knowledge, influence, and confidence. By listening, you are becoming a product master, creating products customers love. Find additional resources at productmasterynow.com. Keep innovating.